Hello and welcome to the latest in the Institute's webinar series, the Lifecycle Institute's webinar on A3 learning. My name is Tara Denton. I'm a learning consultant with the Lifecycle Institute, and I will be your host for today's session. This webinar is going to be an interactive session. We're going to be using whiteboards. We'll be asking you to participate in polls, and we'll also be using the chat box that's down to the right of your screen. We're going to be asking you a couple of questions that we'd like for you to share responses with the rest of the group, but we'll also be using the chat box for any questions that you'd like to send me or my other panelists during this session. I'd like for right now if everyone could go to the drop-down box that's in that chat window, and it's a send to box. You can choose who you'd like to send your comments or your questions to. For the purposes of this session, I'd like for you to select all participants. That will allow not only the panelists to see your responses, but also everyone else that is enjoying the session with us today. So let's go ahead and get started. You may be familiar with the A3 lean problem-solving method. This method was popularized by the Toyota production system, and it's a strategy for defining a problem, then describing the current state of affairs, and describing a desired state. There's an analysis of what caused that gap between the current and the desired state, how to overcome that gap by implementing countermeasures to reach that desired future state. Now, many of the elements of this A3 lean problem-solving process apply to planning an effective learning program. And this webinar today is going to be all about how the Institute was inspired by the lean A3 problem-solving process to explain effective learning very clearly. What we have found in the industry with many of our clients is that there's a gap between learning and application. And to explain this concept a little further, I'm going to use Kirkpatrick's model. Kirkpatrick, about 50 years ago, published a model that had 4 different levels of learning. It began with level 1, it begins with level 1, which is reaction. Did you like the training? Did the training make you feel good? Did you enjoy the training? The second level is learning. Did I understand it? Did I comprehend the concepts that were introduced to me in this session? Now, where the real transfer of knowledge and where the application and where the real practicing of new behaviors begins is in level 3, which is the behavior change, where you're doing it, where you're applying it, you're using your new knowledge. And finally, level 4 is the results, where you actually can show that you have proven results by using this new knowledge that you gain through training. What we frequently see is that we get a lot of information, a lot of data about the reaction to people's learning. You have frequently filled out course evaluations that basically give a sense of how the individual, how the training participant felt about the learning. You may even be able to actually get some data about how people have learned, what level of knowledge did they reach in the class. But the level 3 and level 4 is difficult to reach and to measure. This is what we've found. You may like your learning, you may learn something, but you're probably doing the same things when you get back to your organization. Maybe the boss is still expecting the same results from you. Maybe the processes back at your facility don't allow you to use the new knowledge. So at the Institute, we were really interested in this problem, in this conundrum. So we decided to find a process, find a way to where we can capitalize on our training investments. And the way that we have decided to explain how an organization can capitalize on their investments, their training investments, is by treating learning as a process of alignment, assimilation, and application that changes behavior to produce the results that we want to find. Learning is not about a class, or it's not only about a class. It's about the process of learning. Now, I'd like to find some information about your particular organizations and what you're experiencing at your facility by opening a poll. I'd like to know if it's regular practice at your organization for a training participant to meet with their manager prior to training in order to determine the expectation that that training participant is expected to come back, the new knowledge that they're expected to come back with and actually use on the job. So I want to know if you have an expectation setting prior to a training event. And we'll be getting those results up as soon as everyone answers the poll. It looks like 25% of people on the call are actually setting expectations prior to training. That is a best practice. That's wonderful. And 75% are not. And that's more frequently what we are seeing out there, a more frequent representation of what we're seeing out here. And what we like to introduce to you today, and those 25% of you that are already doing it know, is that the alignment between the manager and the participant about what to learn is very important to the learning process. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw a line, again, between the A3 problem-solving process and the A3 learning process before we go further into the Lifecycle Institute's A3 learning process. The A3 problem-solving process defines a problem. In the A3 learning process, we're defining a performance gap or a performance preparation that we want to happen in order to solve some of these problems. In A3 problem solving, you define a countermeasure. In A3 learning, you determine what kind of learning objectives, what kind of training do you want to have in order to bridge that performance gap. And in the A3 problem solving process, you review, you determine if the countermeasures that you've implemented have actually improved or stopped the problem. In the learning process, we want to be able to actually see some results that can prove that learning, that those objectives have actually achieved results in the organization and our desired results. So the first phase of the A3 learning process is the alignment phase. This is about that definition of that performance gap or that performance preparation we want to give to our employees, and determining what knowledge and skills, what learning objectives are going to bridge that performance gap to get us to our desired performance. So where can we start to define that desired performance, that desired future state? Where do we begin the alignment phase? Well, we begin the alignment phase with the learning objectives. Learning objectives should tell us basically three things: what the class is going to teach, what you want to target to learn, what the training participant would like to learn, and how deeply are you going to learn it. If the learning objective is well written, it's going to let you know what kind of sophistication of knowledge you need to reach in order to complete that task. And the learning objectives uses two models, I guess, to help us define really effective learning objectives: Bloom's Taxonomy and the SMART method. And I'm going to briefly go over these two models for you. Bloom's Taxonomy tells us how deeply and at what level of complexity a person needs to know something, needs to know a concept in order to complete a task. For example, it's easier to define a term than it is to evaluate a process for its efficiency. So we use Bloom's because it's a very straightforward method and framework to help us design effective learning objectives, but it's also a really good way to help us evaluate learning, to help us determine if someone has actually reached the level of cognition that we hope to achieve during a training session. And the higher up you go on the hierarchy, the higher up you get to that creation level, it's actually inverse pyramid on how long in the training session or how much time you're going to need to dedicate to the maturity of learning that should happen in the session in order for you to reach that higher level of cognition. For example, it's easier to pick an answer from a multiple choice quiz than it is to write an essay about a certain concept. The second model that we use to help us write or evaluate effective learning objectives is the SMART method. When you're looking for a training program out there, take a look at their learning objectives for their courses or their course descriptions. Are the learning objectives specific? Are they detailed? They're not vague. Do they have an action verb associated with them so they can be measured in terms of Bloom's or in terms of another evaluation method so that we can actually assess the level of learning that was achieved? Are they attainable? Can the participant actually do something with the new knowledge? Can they reach that learning objective and that goal? What resources do they need to be able to do it? And can they attain the objective in a reasonable amount of time? Is the learning objective relevant to the training participant's work or life? And is the learning objective timed? Is it achievable within a deadline? So we use objectives to help us get started in the alignment phase. What exactly do we want to learn? You know what your performance shortfall is, or what you want to prepare, what new knowledge you want to prepare your workers with. You have determined what kind of learning objectives or what skills or knowledge you need to overcome the shortfall. So how do you document it? Well, we document the alignment phase, and we secure the alignment phase with a learning impact map. This learning impact map facilitates a meeting between the participant, the training participant, and their manager. There is alignment on the learning objectives, the new knowledge and skills that that participant is going to bring back to the organization once they get back from training. And then what organizational goal will those new knowledge and skills help to advance? How will that new knowledge and skills contribute to the organization achieving some goal? So the map creates a direct line of sight from the training event to the results. It actually pulls all three phases of learning, align, assimilate, and apply, together in succession. And I want to show you an example of a learning impact map. You begin by filling out the first column, the knowledge and skills that the participant hopes to learn, and the last column, the organizational goal. Now, in this example, the organizational goal is related to the Q12, which is a system that measures employee engagement. So this organization wants their employees to be measured as engaged according to this tool. So what knowledge and skills, what learning objectives does this person need to bring back in order to help achieve that Q12 goals? The participant is going to focus on creating individual development plans. So that's what they're going to focus on learning when they get into the training class. Now let's do a really quick SMART check. Okay, it's SMART. It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, but it's not timed. Normally, we encourage objectives to have a 90-day time frame. So in this example, when the participant gets back to their organization, they should be able to create an individual development plan within 90 days. After the training, the second and third columns will be completed. Once the participant knows exactly how they're going to create individual development plans, what behaviors are they going to take when they get back? In this example, the participant is going to complete formal individual development plans for all direct reports. And the results that those new actions are going to bring, the specific results. So in this example, the direct reports are going to know that they have a development plan and that they're going to complete it, and that the organizational goal that these individual plans will be able to support is that through having individual trusted development plans, these employees are going to be more engaged. So as you can see, we have a direct line from that training event to the results, a direct line from me, the participant, the trainee, and how am I and my actions, how do they directly contribute to where the organization wants to go? The Learning Impact Map provides a tool for the participant to know what is expected of her in training. Without this alignment, you're leaving it up to chance or for the learner herself to determine why she's there, what she's supposed to learn. I mean, there's a large litany of topics that might be covered in a class. And for the participant to determine for themselves exactly what kernels of knowledge or what's most important to bring back to the organization actually adds a lot of pressure to that training participant. For example, let's say you're going to a leadership class and the training participant was most interested in creating a team vision. So that training participant is really excited when they get back to the office because they have a lot of tools that's going to help their team create a vision. Well, that trainee's manager really hoped that the trainee would come back with better ways to manage group consensus, or, for another example, with better ways to execute performance reviews. Without having defined the expectations prior to learning, you do miss a chance to get the most out of your learning experience. So we've completed the alignment phase. We know what we're going to learn. We're ready for the class. We know how that new knowledge is going to contribute to an organizational goal. The next step is assimilation. This is the classroom event itself. And when you're doing the A3 problem-solving process, you want to find the best solution to the problem. When it comes to learning and when it comes to a learning experience, You want to find the most effective, the best learning experience. So I want to do an exercise with all of you out there. We're going to use a whiteboard. In a minute, I'm going to give you annotation rights, which means that you can use the T icon that's right on the top of the whiteboard. And I'm going to ask you to type an answer to a question. I would like to know, in your experience, what makes a class successful, meaningful? What about that class makes it an effective learning experience? Now, one thing about the whiteboard is that you can type all day long on the keyboard. No one's going to see what you write until you click on the mouse. So if everyone who's out there, let me know. I see engagement. I see practical. I see intera, which I'm thinking means interactions. Interaction, effective communication, relevant and memorable. All of these elements that you guys are writing down are critical to an effective learning engagement. When the knowledge is transferable. Looks like we have some learning experts on the line with it. Useful and fun. I can't tell you how important it is to have fun with learning. I had a colleague say, when you're laughing, you're learning, which I do believe is true. So let's go back now and let's go back to the presentation and let's talk about how what you wrote is actually very descriptive ways to determine an effective learning engagement. And you described some of Malcolm Knowles' 4 principles of learning. Now, Malcolm Knowles based these 4 principles on study of engagement and needs for adult learners. And the first principle of Malcolm Knowles deals with self-direction. The learner likes to have activities with purpose. A couple of you said, it needs to be meaningful and fun. And the participant likes to be able to do some student teaching, do some participant teaching during the class, have a chance to do some individual study, have a choice in the direction of the learning. A need-to-know basis. A lot of you were writing, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be practical, it needs to be meaningful to what I'm doing back at the office. So the adult learner has a need to know. Life's reservoir of experience is a very poetic way of saying that everyone comes to the class with knowledge and experience. And for the most effective learning engagement, we need to be able to assess and access that experience of each individual learner to enrich the class. And lastly, actively, fun, have activities. Let's be engaged in the learning with the body and the mind. We at the Institute heavily embrace Malcolm Knowles' 4 principles of adult learning, but we also have a few additional elements that the Institute considers effective design and delivery. And one of those is CPR chunks. And CPR means Content Participation Review. It's basically a modular structure for delivery, so module-based teaching. 6X is another one of the terms that we use here in the Institute. It means that in order for knowledge to go from short-term to extended long-term memory, the concept should be repeated and designed to be repeated for the best retention. And 6 times a repetition is actually the best number of times to repeat for the most incredible retention. Now, facilitator versus instructor is a little something different that we embrace here at the Life Cycle Institute. This means that we carry a bias towards facilitation, a bias towards coaching the learners to acquire the new knowledge and the new skills, really supporting that sense of self-direction versus an instructor-led experience, which an instructor is a content expert first and could be considered a sage on the stage that disseminates content. Now, there may be a need for both facilitation and instruction in a training. Both elements are definitely needed in different circumstances, but we focus on a need to discern when each approach is appropriate. So the class is over. Now what? So now what is phase 3? Application. The A3 problem-solving process requires that you follow up after the corrective actions are implemented. Check and make sure that they actually worked. Well, in the Lifecycle Institute's Learning as a Process model, learning and learning engagement should also require some sort of follow-up. Did the class bridge the performance gap by changing behavior to produce results? So I'd like to introduce another poll, and I want to get your opinion on which of the 3 phases align, which is aligning the manager and the participant, setting expectations prior to training, assimilate, the class itself, or application, practicing the new knowledge on site. Which one of the phases is most important in terms of changing behavior? In your opinion. Now, they're all important, no doubt about it. That's why we put them together in the process. But I want to know, in your opinion, which phase do you feel is most important in terms of changing behavior? And so we should get those results here in any minute. Well, they're kind of slow on the go, so I'm going to go ahead and press forward. It looks like over 60%, about almost 70% of you said apply, 11% said assimilate, and 22% said align. That's a really good spread. They're all essential. Each phase is essential to the most effective learning. But I will have to agree with the majority here. 80% of learning actually happens when trying out the new knowledge in the application phase. So if you were going to not be able to have any other process associated with your learning programs, allowing the individual to actually experiment with the new knowledge and skills that they gain in training is probably one of the most important things you can do to have an effective learning program. So for application to be most effective, for the application phase to be most effective, you need to put a few things in place. First of all is measurable learning objectives. So you can actually determine if a certain level of learning has been achieved. As I said earlier, we use Bloom so that we can have measurable active learning objectives. Revisit the learning impact map. This is number 2 here. Revisit the learning impact map after the participant has completed all 4 columns and they get back from the training class. Realign that learning impact map if anything needs to adjust. Maybe the goals need to be a little bit smaller so they can be more easily achieved. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more detail added to the actions or the learning, the behaviors that are going to change. And coach. Coaching really helps with the application. Having someone there to support and to mentor you during those very sensitive first 90 days when you're getting back and maybe not so sure about this new knowledge that you've gained. A coach can help you get through those rough times. The last element of this application phase is set goals that can be achieved within 90 days. This is a recency effect. A quick success, these quick wins, can breed and encourage further actions, further improvement. So when you're looking back at your learning impact maps, if you have a long-term goal, no light at the end of the tunnel, specify some shorter-term goals that can be achieved within the 90 days. If you don't do that, if you can't achieve at least a portion of a goal within 90 days, other initiatives are going to get in the way. You'll become complacent, and you may not be so compelled to change your behavior. Changing is sometimes hard. Even doing simpler things a different way can sometimes be difficult. That 90-day window is critical. So as we've seen today, there are many similarities between the A3 lean problem-solving process and the Lifecycle Institute's learning as a process of align, assimilation, and apply. They both have definitions of problems or performance issue. They need alignment on the learning objectives. What are those countermeasures going to be, and why have we decided on that certain training as the countermeasure? And the results. determining if those countermeasures were effective. What kind of behavior change have I seen after that training, and what kind of results did that behavior change bring? Let's draw that direct line, mapping the learner to her new skills, to the results that those skills and that new knowledge, practice have brought, and how those results contribute to the goals of the organizations, where the organization wants to go. So that is the A3 learning process by the Lifecycle Institute in a nutshell. If you want to learn more about this align, assimilate, and apply learning as a process, you can find out more at lifecyclelc.com, or you can contact us. Now, I have a couple of resources I want to share with you before we close the session, and feel free to send any questions now that you have into chat. If I don't get time to answer them here in the session, I will certainly contact you directly and answer them for you. But the Lifecycle has launched the E-Institute, which is a collection of live online facilitated classes. And I just want to really quickly tell you about the next 3 classes that we have coming up. Leading Organizational Change, the important stuff. This course will allow you to dive into change management strategies and how you define, motivate, and coach people through change. All the Institute classes are 2 hours in duration, all $199, and all are limited to 20 participants. This is to make the most effective online learning experience for the participants. The second course that's coming up in January is Say What. This course is about creating and delivering more effective communication. It's about improving your presentation delivery, increasing the efficacy of your message. And in later January, we're going to host Monitoring Reliability Excellence Progress. This class focuses on how to develop and measure metrics to determine the benefits that your Reliability Excellence program is providing to the organization. We also, in this class, we're also trying to develop a craving for maintaining engagement in the Reliability Excellence transformational change, and also to keep those efforts funded. Without results, how are you going to get funding to keep your program going? Finally, if you'd like to contact me or Bill Wilder or any other member of the Institute, here's our contact information. You can also visit our website to learn more about our learning services, which includes custom course development, facilitator development programs, including a train-the-trainer class, and public and private classes. I want to thank you for attending today's A3 Learning webinar, and please complete the survey at the end of the session so we can know if this webinar was of value to you.